Hello, and welcome to the 50-something podcast with me, Andy Barlow, aged 56.
And me, Darran Medley, aged 55.
Okay, so it is Sunday. It's been pouring with rain, and it looks pretty damp and miserable out there. But this is my 5K challenge, so here we go.
Good morning, Andy. Good morning, listeners. I'm about to do my 5K run. I'm down by the Mersey. It's a breezy, cold day. The clouds are scudding overhead. Hope the wind will be behind me. It'll help. I'll record when I'm halfway around.
Okay, so we are 2.5k in to my 5k. Pouring with rain. Everything's very wet. I had to run along the streets because my usual route of running through the woods is just too wet. So I'm sure you know all the cars passing by and the sound of rain. Anyway, onwards and upwards, halfway there.
Okay, so nearly halfway, getting okay. The wind's definitely behind me, which is good. There are a few hills here, which is not helping. They look more like a hill than I like running up them. But coming down now, got a lovely view of the Mersey and across to Liverpool, which I'll take a quick pic when I get near the bottom. Okay.
And that was the sound of Darran and me completing our first 50-something podcast challenge. And I think you'll find that I was so much faster than Darran. Just saying. So this is episode 2 of the 50-something podcast, and today I am absolutely delighted to introduce two very good friends of mine and new friends to Darran, Michelle and Richard. Guys, would you like to just introduce yourselves?
Sure, happy to. Thank you, everybody. I'm Michelle. I'm 56 years old, yay for me, and I am located in the United States. I am a recent transplant from the Midwest, from that lovely state, Ohio, and I am now living in Paradise in Southwest Florida, near Sarasota on the Gulf Coast.
Fantastic. Hello, everybody. I'm Richard. I am Swedish. I am 57 years old, but it's like Viking years. So I'm, biologically 47. I'm actually right now in I run a design agency in Stockholm, but right now I'm in AVBE. It's on an island in the Baltic Sea called Gotland. And I'm here working for a few days. It's just half an hour's flight from Stockholm.
And just before we move on, so I did actually briefly have a chat with Richard before we came on. Richard, what were you doing this morning?
Well, this morning I arrived to AVBE, at AVBE, and then at the lunch break I was actually out in my waders fishing for sea trouts. It's 2 degrees centigrades right now here. That's, I think, paradise to me, to be able to do that on a lunch break.
That sounds amazing. Yeah. Michelle, what were you doing this morning?
Oh, it's perfect. I was at an orthopedic surgeon looking at my foot as somebody who is training for her first marathon in January. I am. I am doing something called the Dopey Challenge. Rightly named Dopey. Who would even think about this challenge? Where you run a 5K on a Thursday, a 10K on a Friday, a half marathon on a Saturday, and to top it off, a full marathon on Sunday.
No way.
And it is in January, so you can imagine the training has really picked up, and all of a sudden, 7 days ago, my foot was just not cooperating. So I went and walked out with him saying, well, good luck. There's nothing wrong with your foot. So if we want to talk about the aches and pains that are now starting to come in with the 50s, that's what I did this morning. I'm happy to say, he said, your x-ray looks great. Good luck with your 20 miles this weekend. So we'll see how it goes.
But the thing is, that's not, that's an effort for somebody in the 20s, let alone in the 50s. So go girl, that's what we want to hear. Absolutely.
Big and bold, that's what I told myself. So going for it.
So Michelle and Richard, thank you for joining us. This is our second episode, and we're going to cover health as the main subject today. We briefly touched up in the first episode about it being in your 50s, you do have to make some serious decisions about your health, because it gives you a platform for the next 30 years. And great to hear you've been fishing this morning and you're preparing yourself for a marathon. Guys, it looks like you're really taking part in stuff. So you're in your 50s. How does it feel? Let's start with you, Michelle. Please tell us, how does it feel to be 50? And do you feel 50?
Well, I don't know what it means to feel 50, but I feel good. I definitely feel good. 50s, to be honest, I was looking forward to turning 50 because I felt like there was a certain freedom with 50. To be honest, I probably wish in my 20s and 30s that I took as good care of myself as I'm now doing in my 50s because I wasn't as mindful of it. But do I feel 50? I don't know. I want Richard to talk about these Viking years because I'm really, really curious about that. Yeah. What would I be in Viking years? But
so do you think you made some serious decisions in your 50s about your health?
Yes.
And what are those?
Yeah, well, I would think, my husband and I are a lot more mindful about what we're eating in our 50s because we both were athletes in our youth. I played about every sport you could possibly play in high school, and I could eat whatever I wanted. I was what they called Bony Maroney was my nickname. I was a 5'10" woman who could eat anything she wanted. Well, that's not the case anymore. So really trying to be focused on a lot more whole food nutrition. We are not plant-based, although it intrigues me. We have really good friends who have adopted a plant-based diet. But just watching things like, refined sugar. I have found when I turned 50, I became a sugar addict. And it was a really, really hard thing to break. They said there's studies that if you put cocaine and sugar in front of mice, the sugar is more enticing and gives them a greater high than the cocaine. And I read that study and I'm like, okay, we really have to watch that. And we both started. I didn't run my first race until I was 52 years old, and I convinced my husband to come along on that journey. I originally was doing it for fun, but now all the health benefits that come with it. So those are just some newer lifestyle things that I've adopted.
Richard, so I've eaten with you in Sweden, and I know that the food over there always tastes very, very healthy. But do you make a conscious effort to eat healthily?
Well, I do, but I have a vision about my health. My vision is to become a fit 90-year-old. Mm-hmm. So, and I sort of defined that a few years ago. And it actually means that because I do work out a lot, but I've stopped doing some things because it's about not getting hurt, So, for example, I don't run anymore. So, Michelle, I envy you that you're going to run a marathon. I don't do that. So I don't run, but I'm a surfer. So I surf and I go to the gym every morning, but I try to avoid hurting myself. And it's very easy to end up being very competitive also at the gym. If you have like 50-something guys and girls gathering around trying to impress each other in some kind of, disaster about to happen. So my vision is to be a fit 90-year-old.
Yeah. It's interesting that when you run marathons, because I've run marathons, as you know, Michelle, but I didn't do them till I was 47.
And I ran London and then ran Oslo in Norway. And what was interesting about running Oslo is I would say that, I don't know, 70%, and these are just figures I'm plucking from my head, but 70% of the people who were running Oslo were over 50. It was like,
wow.
And you find that older people run more distance. And so they build up a stamina and run for longer, but maybe a bit slower. You know, I was never the fastest marathon runner. I think I did 4 hours 13 and 4 hours 16. I think in the two marathons, which is not great. But you know, the guy that I was running with in the Norwegian one, I think he did it in like 3 hours. You know.
Oh my goodness! Yeah, I don't run for time. And I am with you, Richard, on the trying to stay injury free. That's why I was so like, why, foot, are you not working with me today? Because I want to make sure that I can safely do this distance. I won't be in the Olympics. I'm on what I call team just finish. Do it, have fun doing it. And then I decided to do, I'm probably one and done with this type of challenge. I say that now. Ask me January 8th if I feel the same way. I needed something in my 50s that was big and bold as a goal, that was not anything career-wise. It had to be personal. I'm very focused on my personal growth and development in my 50s, more so than I was in my 20s and 30s and 40s, which was all about career growth. Now, don't get me wrong. You know, I work in the design agency world. I'm in strategy. You know, you want to be recognized and rewarded. But I get more pleasure out of being rewarded through what I'm doing in my personal pursuits than anything in my professional life. And that's a 50s mindset for me.
Yeah, that's very insightful. I think giving yourself a really big goal is a great challenge. I kind of did the opposite of you, Richard. I did white collar boxing earlier this year. And to be honest, you don't get hurt. The gloves are big, but you're putting yourselves in a situation where you have to train with other guys. And I played rugby, team sports my whole life, and I've always enjoyed working within a team. Running myself, I find very difficult. Training on my own, I found difficult. So doing boxing was, and you're in a room full of other people who are doing press-ups and push-ups, and that was really motivating for me, and I really enjoyed the experience. And I raised some money for charity. I lost my dad 12 months ago, and he liked boxing, so I raised some money for the charity that supported him at the end of his life, which was great. But I think, so having a big goal is really a really important thing, and having a goal that's about your own personal growth and not just your career is really insightful as well. Do you think, I'll go to you, Richard, this time, do you think do you believe in Sweden you have a different philosophy than other parts of the world to growing older? And do you think it's more supportive or less supportive?
I think that Swedish society is it's rigged to take care of people so that the individuals don't have to, in a way. It's like a social democratic kind of perspective. So, and what that leads on to is that, unfortunately, it creates a lot of loneliness also. Like, one of my brothers is living in Italy, and it's the opposite. They have to fend for themselves. No one is taking care of them. They don't have any social security, nothing. It's just, they have to rely on the family. While in Sweden, it's like, we pay taxes for that. We get social security. No one is really poor, actually, and you know that you will not be on the street.
So we've got the National Health Service in the UK. In the US, it's private insurance. Well, how does it work in Sweden?
It is. We pay taxes, and it's like that NHS thing, but people tend to top that up also, and it's going to be more like in the rest of the world. But I think actually the hospitals and so on are quite okay. I have, unfortunately, a lot of experience of that. My youngest daughter was very sick for a very long time. And right now, my father-in-law has Parkinson's, and I think he gets fantastic care. And it would cost, I don't know, huge amounts. And he gets that from the government. And it's sort of fantastic. And I think there are also, unfortunately, the flip side of that, it creates loneliness because you don't have to take care of the older ones. You know that society somehow will.
Yeah, I think we touched on this in the last podcast that we did, and Darran was talking about the Netflix series. What was it called? Blue something?
Yeah, Blue Zones. I don't know if you guys have seen it. I actually watched a little episode this morning, and there was a line in it that was just about what you've talked about, Richard, which was you hope for health, but you incentivize for sickness. So you save all this money for when you're old and you're ill, and then in some parts of the world they have pretty low standard of living, but they live to a much older age because they have to rely on themselves to be not ill, to stay fit, to carry on working a little bit, to eat the right things, etc., etc. It's really interesting.
I think one thing on that, though, and one of our listeners actually said this, emailed us about this, was that the way that we talked about it in our last pod was that it'd be great if everybody could sort of have didn't put parents into homes and they can live with you like they do in certain parts of the world. And it's like, and this person was saying, yeah, that's great, but in certain parts of the world, like in Italy, that is their culture as well. And so to try and introduce that into, British culture, say, where it isn't in their culture in the same way, would be quite difficult. And so it's not so easy. And so, the way people go into homes, and sometimes they actually want to be there as well. They find community where, like Richard was saying, the opposite of that can happen. Where the system is so good.
Yeah, I mean, I will add to that, as somebody who has a parent in full-time care, my mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. So that is, and we're not in the United States, it's not our culture, unfortunately. A lot of times to care for, it's not like a multi-generational situation that you bring everybody together in their older years. We are very much reliant on putting people into nursing homes, into assisted living, or there has been such an explosion of memory care. I think dementia is an epidemic here in the United States. I don't know if that's a global thing, but it's definitely running rampant in the United States. And so my mother is in memory care, and it's very, very expensive. My father private pays that because we don't have government, obviously, as you know, assistance with health care unless you're destitute in poverty. Then you qualify. Or if you're super wealthy, it doesn't really affect, the pocketbook. But if you're middle class in America, you're screwed. I mean, I hate to be so blunt about it, but you really are. And so he's paying out of pocket for her. They thought she'd last 6 weeks. My mother has been over a year now there. And, it's very difficult to, and that's also something in your 50s. If you have anything health-wise that you think could be genetic. My sister is another woman in the middle, so to speak, in her 50s. She's 3 years younger. And we're always worried about, are we going to get what mom has? How do we keep our brain healthy? And, a lot of that, I believe, can be very environmental. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a physician. There's a very low percentage of it that is genetic. A lot of it is, they say, is environmental, but we just keep, there's nothing we can do about it other than to continue to live as healthy a lifestyle as we can. And so, yeah, it's definitely a completely different healthcare system, as you guys know, here in the U.S. It's expensive.
I had a client in the States that I got to know very well. And this person, I got to understand that they couldn't people don't dare to change jobs because they can't start their own businesses, things like that, because it's so expensive with these insurances. And that's very different from in Sweden, but it struck me so strange to me to hear this. But it's a totally different system. I mean, Sweden, we have so many things that are not good, but I think it's good that people dare to change jobs, that they have some kind of social security, that no one is left on the street. I'm proud about to be Swedish in that sense. I think it's a good thing.
I did find it quite weird, actually, when I lived in the States, and Michelle and I worked together, coming from a country with a health system, a very good system. I mean, obviously people complain about it all the time, but of course they do. It also saves a lot of lives. But I remember going to the doctor for something, I can't remember what it was even, and they would say, "Oh, come by any time if you need an X-ray, I can do that for you immediately." And it was all this, it was fantastic, beautiful health centre, and everything was wonderful. But I went in because I don't know what, I really can't remember what it was, but it cost me $100. Just to go in and say hello to the doctor and say, "Look, I've got a bad knee," or whatever it was. And this was me paying private as well. So I got the health care, but it still cost me $100. And I was like, hang on a minute, what? How does that work? So I don't know. I
think we can have a whole episode on healthcare across the world for sure. Yeah.
We're going down a rabbit hole, and this was always going to happen. But
yeah, it does happen. Okay, let's skip to another question. To you, Michelle, best and worst things about being in your 50s?
Oh, good one. Best thing about being in the 50s is the sense of freedom that you have with 50, because I want to say that I don't sweat the small stuff. That might be a little bit of a lie, but I feel freedom to speak my mind, do what I want, be hopefully recognized for what, you've achieved and accomplished. And, hey, if you want to drop an F-bomb or two, nobody is like, that is the one thing that's been the funniest in my 50s. I don't swear until I got into my 50s. I don't know what's going on because I feel like I'm not going to be judged for it. So I think 50s, we were young empty nesters, had our children. We have 2 children who have not lived with us for several years. And there's just freedom to do what we want and be what we want and, just worry about ourselves. And I don't mean that in a selfish way, but it does sound a little selfish, I think, for 50s.
I think we talked about this in the last pod, and we sort of said, I think it's about ownership.
Yeah.
Like we can now, we in our 50s, we kind of have more ownership of our lives. It feels that way.
It does. And you feel like ownership. I mean, we're not really in control of anything, but there is more of a sense of control. But I think also, I'm the only female of the group, right? So there's this thing called menopause that us women go through. I was an early menopause girl. My mother was early. I followed in her footsteps. So all of the wonderful things that come with that.
Now, how old were you, if I may ask, how old were you when you first started?
I had my last period I was 48 years old. It was my son's high school graduation, and that was it. And so, there's that transition. They say you're like Perry's 10 years before, and then you go through it for 10. And I'm like, oh, hell no. No, I'm not doing this for 20 years. I have no time for that. Nor does my husband have any patience for it, I'm sure. But just the symptoms that you can't control. I'll be, honest. I never took anything. I just decided, Andy knows me. I powered through. I didn't want to take hormone, and it's really great for a lot of women. Hormone replacement therapy, or the bioidenticals, the things that are not, more natural hormones. I didn't do any of that. But Darran, when you ask that question, the worst thing about 50s is I will sometimes stress over every little ache and pain that comes my way, because I'm like, what's that? That's something new. That's something different. What's that symptom? Where I never did in my 30s or 40s. So, menopause is, it can be tough for a lot of women, to go through. I had some things that were challenging, but I think I'm on the other side and doing as best as I can.
There's three guys on this call, and my partner is 49. She is obviously thinking about the menopause and when it's going to happen and worrying about it. Is any words of wisdom, both for her and for us guys, in terms of being, helpful and considerate in terms of what's going on? Because a lot of it's invisible.
Yes, it is invisible. Here is my advice to all of you. Just validate what she's feeling. You validate it and you move on. Some of the stuff might be the mood swings. You try to empathize and validate. And sometimes all you have to do is just remove yourself from the situation. I'm a really big believer in validation. I practice it with my clients. I have crazy clients sometimes. I practice it with my spouse, with my children. That's the biggest advice. Just validate it, because you're kind of outside of yourself. As a woman, I know I was looking in like, who is that person? And I did not. I really was very minimal. The hot flashes. You know what? If she wants to go into the other bedroom, allow her to do that. Don't think that it's something against the relationship, because sleep in our 50s is so important. She's not going to sleep well for a while. She's going to get hot, maybe. She might get mean and angry. All these other things.
It sounds like
it's
me.
temporary.
It sounds like Richard most of the time.
Hey, there's such a thing as male menopause. I've heard the term. I think it's just men just trying to validate their own craziness, but I'm just kidding. But yeah, that's my advice.
We did have one of our listeners did write in and say that this was her worst thing about the 50s was being a woman on a board of directors and going into the boardroom and having a hot flush and being laughed away as a woman of a certain age. And she found it, as you would, incredibly insulting. But this happens, and this is another thing that I think women in their 50s, as they are, tend to be on a higher level as they progress through their careers, like you, Michelle. You're now at the top level of your career. Do you walk into that meeting room, and how do you feel as a woman? Sorry, Richard, we'll come back to you, I promise. But I think just while we're on this thread, how do you feel? Do you feel at all intimidated, frustrated?
No, I don't feel intimidated. I do feel frustrated sometimes, though. I think that's a really good thing. I work for an agency that is a female CEO. It's female empowerment all day long there. So that part is really great. It's when we get into the client boardrooms where they don't match demographically that sometimes it feels, you not only feel your gender it being a problem, but you also sometimes feel the age. Right now, a lot of my clients who actually are close to the same level as me are actually much younger. Some of, when you work in retail, for instance, with a lot of retailers, their trajectory growth can be much faster than some of us in the agency world who just tend to, because we're so flat, right? We're just flat. There's not a lot of hierarchy like you get with clients and retailers and brands. So I feel that sometimes, but you know what? It doesn't debilitate me anymore. I used to be a young woman in her 20s and 30s who would always felt like I had to bring, no offense to the gray hair on the call, but I would have to bring the gray hairs in, so to speak. in order to have some sort of credibility. I have credibility now. I've been doing this a long time, so I feel a lot more empowered.
You own it. Yeah.
I try to own it. I really try to own it.
Yeah. I've worked with you. I've seen you in those boardrooms. She owns it.
Hey, at 56, I got to get something out of this, making it this far, right? So you got to own it. You got to own it.
Richard, what would you change? In
do you
your
mean?
50s, is there anything that you would kind of go, I wish that didn't happen, or I've noticed this, or I don't like that, or are you just comfortable? You're a very laid-back guy. I've known you for a long time, and you'll just kind of drift through in this very carefree, relaxed, surfing in my 50s,
ironic.
fishing in the morning,
No.
chilled out Swede.
Well, first, I was thinking about, Michelle, what you said about the worst things. And in Sweden, it's very geared towards youth. So it's like totally centered around youth, energy, young. And so if you're applying for new jobs, I think that's a sort of not good in Sweden, because it's all about the new and all of that. If I compare that to my brother who is living in Italy, where they have another sort of sense of, let's call it respect, or, seniority means more, but Sweden is very youth-oriented. Having said that, I really like the age I'm in right now. I like to be in my 50s, and I was thinking a little bit why. And now I'm speaking about me, not in general terms, because I think that at this stage of life, our kids, twin daughters, they don't live at home anymore. 2 years ago, they left the nest, so to say, and then we got freedom, but it also became a little bit empty. Empty nests, that's why it's called that. And it was a bit like a crisis, I have to say, because crisis is about taking a new direction. And we were thinking like, why should we cook food anymore? For whom? Maybe we should just go out every night and do other things. And it became quite boring. And then you suddenly have so much free time on your hands. You don't have to, you're not responsible for someone else. You don't have support someone. So you have so much time. And I think you need to redefine what you should do with that time when you come to that point. Because I see so many people that don't do that. And they sort of end up sort of a bubble of being comfortable and just doing the same things all over and over. They know what to go and have breakfast on a Saturday morning. They know all this. They know what to watch. They have sort of this bubble, comfortable, smooth life. But life just suddenly ends. And life is not about only being smooth. Yeah, life is about contrasts. It's about challenges. It's about problems. That's what life is about. So I think that what I like about this age is that me and my wife, she is also in her 50s, and we have sort of 4 things that coincide that I think are important. One is that we have reasonable health. We're healthy. We have reasonable means so that we can do things. You need some money to spend. We also own our time in a way because we have our own businesses, and we can. The clients own my time, but to a reasonable extent. I'm in Gotland right now, for example. And the 4th dimension, I would like to call it a sense of adventure. I think that's so important, because if you don't have that, you don't do things. You don't expose yourself to trouble. That's what life is about, solving problems. And if you don't do that, you end up just being in a sort of smooth 50s bubble. I don't know, that suddenly life is over. Yeah.
Beautiful way to describe it, and it's fantastic.
It's a wise Viking.
A wise Viking, yes.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm actually don't look like a Viking at all. You see me. So I'm people think I'm from another country, but I don't know. My sister did a DNA analysis. She lives in La Jolla in San Diego, by the way. And she told me she had one of the highest percentages of Neanderthal genes that they ever came across.
Andy has a second.
Yeah. So maybe I'm Neanderthal Viking. I don't know.
I did one of those tests, the ancestry one, and I was I was so desperate to be not English, which sounds crazy. But I just and it started off, and they take some blood or something like that, and then they kind of keep updating you over the years, and this has probably been going on for like 10 years now, and every year I'll get a new update, and it started off, and I was like, I think it was 85% Western European, and then and I was thinking, okay, that's quite big. That actually takes me into Sweden, and it's Germany, and it's France, and it's northern Spain. And I was thinking, okay, this is cool. And then it kept going down and down and down. And so my latest one, I'm pretty much from the Isle of Man, which is a tiny little island off the northwest of England. I'm pretty much from it. Can't get much more English. But I am 1% Norwegian. And so I'm a Viking.
I think we're all 1% Viking somewhere along the line.
Well, while we're going down this rabbit hole... Darran, what's yours though? Really interesting.
I've got a mixed, as we all have. I don't know if you've done yours, Michelle, but
I have.
All of us come from somewhere, and so there's a mixture. So I'm a third British. My mum and dad are both British. I'm a third Thai, and then I'm a third Kazakhstan, which is sort of Central Asian Europe, and then 1% Viking somewhere in, so a bit of a Mongol of things, a real mixture, which I think is really interesting. And Britain's an island, so you're bound in some ways to get a lot of people coming into it, sailors, etc. So you're going to get lots of mixes of cultures. What was yours like, Michelle?
50% Irish. My mother is 100%. So, of course, I ended up getting that. With Eastern European, I have Lithuanian, Polish, the Baltic comes up as well. And I think there was a little bit, Andy, there may have been a little bit of Britishness in there somewhere.
Good
I don't know if that was from, I know. I can't get away from it, my career. But no.
You can tell it's all in the accent.
It's all in the accent. For sure. It's fascinating. And then to see, as people want to reach out to you, it's like, oh, you have this. It's a little creepy, though, too. Oh, we're like third removed cousins on your mother's side. You want to get together. Well, I'm not quite so sure about that. But yeah.
I haven't done the DNA test because I also don't want to know, because I in my fantasy, I have a clear picture of where I come from. And I'm not blonde, for example. And my mother always told me that my grandmother's parents, they found, what do you call it in English? They found a child on the doorstep. Some baby, they left the baby outside the door, which they took care of and adapted. And it was very dark with the curly hair. And my mother always said, it's probably a French duke.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
My wife says, no,
it's more than
Richard,
likely. Yeah.
I'm 100% sure you're from, travelers or, that type of people. That's your blood. But in my mind, I'm sort of partly French count, duke.
I love that.
Novelty.
Yeah.
Bonjour.
Thank you. Good.
Talk about owning it. Yep, that's awesome. Oh, that's funny. The other thing I wanted to add, if it's all about health and wellness and things in your 50s, that's super important that we didn't talk about is that's making new friends. That is difficult, yet so important, because you can't rely on your spouse for all of it. I mean, my husband and I are very, very different in a lot of ways. We did decide in our older years to pick an activity that we enjoy together. So things for outdoor adventure. It's one of the reasons we moved to Florida, because I listened to your first episode, which I loved you talking about. If, we can work anywhere now. And all I need is my setup that I have right here with you and an airport close by. I still travel globally. I won't tell you, Andy, that I was in London and I didn't call you. I'm so sorry about that. But we were in and out like the wind. But making new friends in your 50s, you've got to put yourself out there. It can be really challenging. For us, we moved to several states away across the country. And you have to get out there socially so you can meet people. And it's not only as couples, but also as individuals. And if I can do a shameless plug, if you guys don't mind, one thing that I started with a friend I met at a gym, both in our 50s, we met in Ohio, but we weren't friends, just acquaintances. We met at the gym. She said, "Oh, my husband and we're moving to Florida." I go, "Well, so are we. Where are you living? Where are you going to be living?" 30 minutes away from us. So she and I started, we're in the social media world as two. She's 55, I'm 56. We decided to start a YouTube channel. And just something, it has nothing to do professionally. It's called Take 10 with Shane and Michelle. And all we do is just, what is our life like in Florida? And it's about adventures and the beyond. We both travel for work, so we cover that. But just fun things. Andy knows this, we love the Disney brand. She does as well, so we cover that. We'll go out to eat, and we'll cover it as two ladies who, are experiencing a restaurant for the first time. Or we recently had a boat company watch a boat video that we did, just weekends with friends, where we rented a boat. He's like, "Can you ladies start advertising for our company?" We didn't go into it with that mindset.
Oh,
we just wanted to have
Wonderful.
We just wanted to have fun and something that the two of us could own as two women in our 50s. So I tell everybody, get out, make friends and just do something that is different than what you're doing in your everyday. And we've really enjoyed that.
Yeah, on that note, Michelle, I love that because it's like exposing yourself to trouble. I mean, what you do with that YouTube channel, I think it's great. It's an example of that your sort of sense of adventure, that you have to have that dimension as well. And me and my wife, we did a bit the same. We decided we needed new problems to solve together. So we actually, we had this, in Gotland, where I am now, we have this sort of, let's call it a micro hotel. It's like a place we rent out. We wanted to do that also abroad somewhere. So we decided to look for a place to start sort of a micro hotel, if you will. 2 years ago, we bought a property in Sicily, which we are turning into a micro hotel, which call it Ortigia Secret Garden. So we have this secret garden micro hotel in Visby in Gotland. It's a townhouse with a secret. Well, you've been there, Andy, so you know it. Yeah, but we're doing a little bit the same in Siracusa, in Ortigia. It's in the south of Sicily. And it's also what you need to do. I mean, for one thing, we need to learn Italian because no one speaks English. And you need to meet new friends. You don't know nobody there. So it's really exactly what you're describing, Michelle, to sort of expose yourself to those things that you have to solve and do things that you haven't done before. And I think it's a great adventure. And we are into trouble also, but we enjoy it and we're not rushing it. So.
Brilliant. I'd call my friendship with you, Andy, exposing myself to trouble.
Maybe that's what we should call this podcast.
I like it.
So, Richard, we are in our mid to late 50s now, you and I. Michelle's a lot younger and Darren's a mere babe. But how do you feel, a youth, how do you feel about approaching 60? Is that daunting? Is this something that is worrying you? Or are you going to embrace that in the same way as you've embraced your 50s?
I think like Michelle said earlier about the age you're in, you can't really relate to it until afterwards. But to me, thinking about that in a few years, I will turn 60. I mean, when I was a teenager, I thought about Gandalf, as an old archaic guy in his 60s. So that's my mental image of, but I don't feel like Gandalf. How does it feel? I don't know. But, I mean, so it's a little bit daunting, I have to say. And 60, to me sounds very old.
Does it? You see, I've got friends in their 60s. I've got friends in their 70s, actually, but I've got friends in their 60s who, they're the same age as me. Do you know what I mean? So I don't see 60 as a worry. I was more worried about being 30 than I was 40. 50 was slightly worrying because that did feel quite old. 60, I'm really not bothered about.
Okay, cool. No, I'll take your word for it, and I'll see you as sort of a.
Well, we'll see when we're in our 60s, and like you say, you have to be there to actually appreciate it.
I don't have to be Gandalf.
You don't have to be Gandalf. No. Yeah.
No. Yes.
Michelle, were you going to say something then?
No, I was just thinking on the other side, I from a female perspective, when I was in my 40s, I thought men in their 60s were still very attractive. And I think when we think about that part of it, and not that I'm saying men in their 60s aren't attractive now that I'm in my 50s, but then I think about it, from a guy's perspective looking at females in their 60s, I hear you, Richard, it feels old. And I'm almost there. And, I'm not sure. I don't know what 50s feels like the prime of life right now. It feels like the prime of my career. Does 60s seem like the coming back down? I don't know. At face value, it seems that way. Am I intimidated or worried about turning 60? Absolutely not. Yeah.
If your health is good and you go into your 60s, obviously that's very important.
Yes.
Are you talking more about the pressure on aesthetically looking younger still, Michelle?
Yes. Because you said you were going to throw out if we wanted to do plastic surgery or not.
Yeah. Let's go there then.
I always said no, that I wouldn't. And then I travel with clients, no joke, women in their 30s. And they're like, well, we got to get back. We've got our next Botox injection. And I'm thinking, you're 37 years old. And they own it. They're like, hell yeah, girl, we're in preventative now. And I'm like, well, I can't prevent anything because I'm already far down the other. What can I do at this point? Is it maintain? Is it course correct? I don't know. I don't know what I would do. I haven't done anything yet, but it doesn't mean that I won't do it in my 60s in order to, especially in a field where, number one, I'm in front of people all the time in the agency world, right? I'm in meetings, I'm presenting, there's thought leadership, I do love filters when I can get them on, if I have to do a presentation virtually. I don't know. I'm not sure.
Do you think there's more pressure on women than men?
Yes. Yes.
I think you're right. It is. And it's a very sort of superficial world in a way. It's all about, packaging and what you look like. I look to a country like Italy where age and sort of seniority means something. I
think you said the same about France, Paris, Andy. Yeah, the Parisians have a more refined respect about older age group as well.
But French women don't get fat. I read that book in my 30s. That's not true for American women. It's hard, because that's hard. It's harder for us to lose weight in our 50s and 60s as Americans. And it's self-imposed. Let's just call it what it is. But metabolism-wise, the hormones, everything. I think you guys, I don't know if you guys talked about it in the first episode. I can't remember, but it's just, as women, we gain weight in our middle because our hormones are just all out of whack. You can watch everything you eat and exercise, and it's just still really difficult. I used to let that frustrate me, but I feel good. You asked one of the questions when we were talking and just thinking about the things. Do you diet? Do you exercise? Do you, I've started intermittent fasting. And to be honest, it's for my clarity of my mind more than anything. And the results are fantastic. And that is a goal that I have for myself. Could I keep that up? Running and intermittent fasting don't necessarily always jive. You have to watch that when you get into the double digits or when you train, versus
when you're doing a marathon, it's going to be hard.
Yeah. It is. And the doctor said, you know what, you don't worry about it then. But also you don't lose weight when you're training for a marathon. It just doesn't happen. And I thought, my gosh, I'm logging in all these miles, but you are so hungry that it just balances out, to be honest. So, yeah.
Would you ever go back to any age and relive? Meaning that you would have to keep reliving until your current age,
Well, to me, my 30s was just a blur. So I don't ever want to relive it. I'm happy in my 50s, but I also think that it's interesting. I discovered a funny insight about myself in my 50s. And I actually discovered that I am a vampire. Yes. I'm a vampire for creativity.
French vampire.
Yeah, and it's actually, my insight is that I feed off young creatives. That's what I do. And I sort of drain their creativity. But
ladies
I think
and gentlemen, never go and work for Richard.
Symbiosis. But it's a symbiosis. It's a symbiosis because we give each other things. And I think that's the beauty of I consider myself almost like their school teacher. And they are fantastic young creatives. And I can use my seniority and my sort of more, let's call it strategic perspectives and experience, and we do great things together. But I really discovered that I'm a vampire and how that works, and I sort of feed off them. That's an insight I had when I was in my 50s.
I call it a mentor, not a vampire, but you know what? I've got a little bit of some spookiness going on in my headband today. It is Halloween, so I'm sporting it, but mentorship, being a good mentor to others if there's anything I can give back, I could try to give back, money and all of those types of things, which, are important to me to give my resources, but it's just giving back to next generation. And in my field, that is something that I feel like all these years I've, powered through the 20-somethings in our agency or other people. So I'm still involved with our university in terms of a mentorship program in the business school. That's my way of, was this all worth it? So I think that's a nice, that I hope I can carry into my 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s. And
so one last thing we need to ask of you. So Darran and I, as we progress these podcasts, we want to be we are proactive. We want to be doing different things, trying different things.
Exposing ourselves to trouble.
Exposing ourselves to trouble. We'll call this episode Exposing Ourselves to Trouble. Meet
we should.
Richard and Michelle. But we set ourselves a challenge in the last pod, which was to run 5K. Neither of us had run 5K as in one go for a while. So we've done that. We managed that. That was all right. Quite easy, really. So we are going to be asking our guests going forward to give us a challenge. What can we do between now and the next podcast, which will be in sort of 3-ish weeks' time? So it can't be, train for a marathon. We don't have that amount of time. So just something top of your head, and we'll see if we can keep to it.
I have a challenge to the both of you. And I know, Andy, that you do something you call wild swimming.
I do. Yes.
Yes. And I want the both of you to do that and, bring out the inner Viking in yourselves.
Excellent.
And I want you to do that now in November. If you can please explain what this wild swimming is.
So I swim. There's a local, I suppose in America we call it a park, which is Hampstead Heath, which is near to where I live. And in the heath there are 3 ponds, and I go swimming in one of the ponds, and it's icy cold in the winter, absolutely glorious in the summer. But around this time, the water will probably be about 13 degrees Celsius. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, but it's chilly. It's chilly. But it's a wonderful feeling. And I have to say, Richard, that's a good one, because I've not been since probably July. And so the last time I went, the water's 21 degrees, and that's quite a lot warmer. So, Darran, you're going to be going in the Mersey.
Will I need a wetsuit?
No wetsuits. No wetsuits. That's the other thing. You're just going to go straight in. And I recommend that when you get in, try and stay in the water up to your neck for 2 minutes. And as soon as you get into 2 minutes, you are fine. You can then swim around for half an hour or whatever, and you come out. And your skin is hot. You're so cold.
I might come and do it with you at Hampstead Heath, Andy.
Brilliant. All right, there we go. There we go. There's a challenge from Richard. We shall do that. We'll record it and we'll tell you what we think. And so I think that kind of wraps up. And so I just really, really, really like to thank Richard and Michelle, Richard from Sweden, Michelle from the US, for joining us on this international event that is the 50-something podcast. Thank you both so very, very much for joining us, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey.
Hey.
We'd love to hear different perspectives on the subjects that we discuss. So if you're 50-something, have a point of view, we would love to hear from you. Email us at 50somethingpodcast@gmail.com.